Hello everyone, it's Shel C from PaperOcotilloStudio, and today I'm sharing with you the second part of making collage components. This is the making of a piece of art that I made out of the collage components that I made in the first one, as well as some other bits and parts and stuff, mostly from magazine. The magazine I used for these pieces is Guitar Magazine, and of course I end up using a stencil from StencilGirl of a guitar. So that's why it's called Guitar Legend. And first thing I'm doing, this is a what is it? 8 by 10 or 9 by 11 wooden panel. So it's like a canvas, only it's made out of wood. It has a hollow back, can be easily hung up on the wall by just using a tack, and sticking it up there. And I have all these little bits that I've either torn out of the magazine, or they're the ones that I've made in part one, which of course there'll be a link for you to go watch part one if you haven't seen it yet. There's some gel printing and some other techniques to make all these pieces that you see laying around. I've used some of Seth Apter's new IZink ice stuff on it, so you'll be able to see that. Some more demos of that. Different types of thin papers. I made some collage components by sanding the paper with a stencil underneath to make interesting patterns. And I'm using my Liquitex matte gel medium, and in some cases I've used a little bit of the fluid matte medium as well, depending on the type of paper and whether or not I feel it's going to wrinkle. If you think about the thin papers, you should remember to use the right glue, because, like for instance, this paper that is what's left over from a tea bag after you've used it and then emptied out the dry tea, it needs to have a fluid medium to glue it down, because otherwise it wrinkles. It's just the way it is. It catches on the more thick mediums, so you kind of have to have both. I've also just got straight up pieces torn from the magazine that haven't been altered in any way, like those words up at the top that say TO letters. And also this piece I just stuck on is like some, I don't know, some weird paint in a picture. And then this one that I'm sticking on right now is some guitar tabs, some music, the way that they can make music writing without actually making music writing. It's called tabs, and I don't know how it works, but I have a son, and really, I mean, there's a lot of people in my family who are really into music and play the guitar, so I'm used to this type of stuff. That's how come I have an old magazine that's a guitar magazine that I can tear up. So I just continue to glue things down here and there. I want to make sure that the edges of the wooden panel are completely covered, because I don't intend to frame this. I just intend it to be able to be put right up as is, which is what I enjoy personally. I don't need a bunch of fussy frames to, make the art seem more substantial by matting it and framing it and all that. I like to just have the art itself up on the wall. So that's the reason that I go around the edges of canvases and things to make sure that everything is covered all the way around and can just be used as it is. I think I got this wooden panel at Walmart, so if you're looking for some, try there. They won't have any of the large ones, but they do have smaller ones, and it's just wood. A frame of wood with a thin laminated piece on top, all stuck together. Pretty cool for collage to have these panels. Also, Arteza has a nice collection of them. You can buy them in multiple packs. I know I have some 10 by 10s that I got from Arteza as well, and I know they have larger sizes than that. So, they're out there. I'm sure other art supply stores have them as well. It's just all about the price, I guess, how much they're going to cost you to ship That's always what I worry about, which is why I get most of my stuff from Amazon. So I'm just continuing to make sure everything is stuck down really well, making sure all the edges are covered. And I've used a lot of these different collage components, trying to balance the lights and the darks. Also, just making sure, like I didn't want those letters to be there the way they are. I wanted the color, the black and the orange, but I didn't want the letters. So I put a piece of the collage components over the top of that. I'm putting one down here to lighten things up. Just trying to make it balanced and interesting and a lot of pattern and texture. Some of these pieces have the dried IZink ice on them, which is a textured product. I put it through a stencil when I put it on the pieces, and it's raised up, and you can feel it if you run your fingers across it. It's a translucent glaze, but it's also a medium. It's like a gel medium. So you can definitely make texture with it very easily. So once I'm happy with the background and everything's kind of glued down, I think it looks really interesting. I decide to use this guitar stencil. This is from StencilGirl. I'll go through and try to figure out all the stencils that I used and put the links to them in the description box below. I know they're all from StencilGirl. It's just all ones that were on my desk, but I recently got this funky guitar one because I thought I could use it in projects for people in my family. And so I used heavy gesso as a medium to put through the stencil, and I used a silicone brush to press it through the stencil. And then I'm just using a pencil to clean up where some of the fine lines of the stencil might have gotten squished out because I pressed too hard with the silicone spatula thing. And right now it looks really super clear. I continue to mess with it, and I get it. What I should have done is I should have stopped at that point and I should have let it dry. But I was on a live show when I was working on this, and so I continued to work. So I tried to dry it up as much as I could with a heat tool, and then I went ahead and used another part of the stencil, which is kind of a forearm and hand, and I put that on. And as I put the stencil over to work on the different pieces, like right now I'm making another collage piece, I squished the gesso a little bit, which actually was okay with me because this is a very grungy piece, a very distressed looking, masculine almost looking piece. So I wasn't overly worried about messing up the stenciling a little bit. I do wish that the lines on the guitar had stayed a little bit crisper. So then I decided to add some more of the IZink ice and add a couple more collage components. I like the way the translucent stuff, I guess I'm going to call it a translucent gel. That's my best way to describe what it is. I like the way it can add dark and light at the same time, depending on how thick you make it. So it's fun to apply that product with the silicone brush because then you get a good variation of light and dark as you're using it, because the thicker areas make the color more intense and the thinner areas are more just like a real thin color changing glaze. So I'm adding all three colors that I have. I think that they're called Sunshine and Whiskey, something about whiskey, and then the last one is Coffee, I think. So right there, I really pressed too hard as I was putting the glaze over the top, and that's when I smeared the lines on the guitar a little bit. So then I went back in with the pencil again and cleaned them up just by taking the point of the pencil and running it through so that I can lift up that smeared gesso as much as I can. So it was probably fine until then. And then I was like, dang it. So I'm also applying some more of the glaze with my fingers. And then at that point, it's like this thing needs to dry. So I spent quite a bit of time once it was completely dry, and you notice the light has changed in my room because this is the next day. I spent quite a bit of time sanding. This is very textural. It's got a lot of bumps and creases and just, I don't know. I wanted to sand it back and kind of change the color a little bit by doing that. So I didn't leave all the sanding in. I just only left a little bit, just so you can see I'm using sanding blocks and sanding down the texture and trying to bring up some of the lighter areas that are underneath. And that's really a really cool effect when you're doing some sort of a kind of a grungy textured piece, is to do a little bit of sanding, and it really changes the way it looks. And then I had this other piece that was torn out of that same magazine. It's an ad. I don't even know what it was for, but probably guitar equipment or something. And I like the words "A True Legend," but they were the wrong color. And so after I collaged those on, then I again used the IZink ice to change the color so that it blended into the piece with that more kind of aged, weathered look. I think it's cool. I think it goes really well with the rest of the piece. I do wish that those words had been brown instead of blue, but there is a little bit of this Tiffany blue color here and there on the piece, so I figured it would be okay. Next, I do some kind of shading and touching up and trying to fix some of those lines that got a little bit smeared. This is a Faber-Castell Artist Pit Pen, which is a India ink pen, and because all this is sealed up pretty well with different mediums, I have a few seconds to smear. So I can either make kind of a straight line, or I can go around things and make a shadow by smearing like I'm doing right now with my fingers. And I think that helped darken up the area in the middle where the stenciling was a little weird. I needed that darker shadow in the background to make it stand out a little bit more. So it integrates the stenciling into the piece. It gives it more depth and gravitas so that you can see, the first thing you see when you look at it is the guitar. And then you see maybe the words next, and then you go from there. So it definitely needed that pit pen. I don't know. That was a good thing to do. It was a dark brown color, probably a sepia or some sort. Then I wanted a few more marks. This is a mark making stencil, and I wanted some light, a little bit more light to come in. So this is Titan Buff colored acrylic paint, and I'm using a brush that is designed for doing makeup. It's a kind of almost like a toothbrush, but it has a really fine brush on it, and I can put just the tiniest bit of acrylic paint on it, and then it doesn't just go crazy and be so bright and so thick. It's like a thin layer of paint, and this brush is really good for that, also for a detailed stencil. I know this one is the ATC stencils from Seth Apter. I figured I better put some Seth Apter stencils on there since I was using his product. Actually, they were there, and that worked out well. The other one is a cat cur stencil. And I thought that helped with bringing a little bit of light to the background and making it more interesting. Then I thought I would make some really dark black, because there's the black in a couple of the pieces of paper and then this one little stenciled area, but there wasn't any other black. So I decided to make some gestural mark making using a Stabilo All pencil. I make lines and scribbles, and I like highlight a few of the stencil pieces by circling them or scribbling around them, which I think makes it more interesting. Of course, that Stabilo All pencil is not permanent. It's something that needs to be sealed eventually at some point. And I will seal this with spray before I give it away to the person that I'm going to give it to. But I also wanted to seal it a little bit in between with some gloss medium. I'm making some marks on the side because there's some light areas. I should also put some of that ice, probably the whiskey colored one, over some of the sides too, because there's not any of it on there. And I think that it changes the overall color tone of the piece. So I need to do that. I'll do it later. Still adding some more of that with my fingers. That dark coffee color, I'm adding it in a few places with my fingers. I wanted to bring light back in with the stenciling and pattern, but I also didn't want it to be blaringly white. Like, oh, look at me, look at me. I just wanted to lighten up a few areas. I have a hard time leaving white. I tend to want to fill in everything. So sometimes I need to bring it back. Then I thought I would add a little bit more stenciling using that pit pen again and just letting the pit pen run over the top of the stencil and then rubbing it with my finger into the grooves, and it gives a soft stenciled effect. I hope you've enjoyed this video and the one that came before this. You can look at the end screen and it'll give you a link. If you have, please remember to give it a thumbs up and leave a comment or question below. Subscribe, turn on your notification bells, all that social media stuff that I need to tell you to try to help my channel continue to grow. When you do all those things, YouTube's algorithm finds me easier and makes a suggestion to other people that they should watch the video. So that's why I always appreciate it. So the final thing I'm doing here is I've just got a little bit of gloss medium, and this is when I said I was going to just give it a little bit of sealing. I'm kind of almost dry brushing it on. It gives it even more texture, and it also gives it a little bit of shine. I don't use gloss medium very often, but since the IZink ice is glossy, I figured gloss medium. So here come the close-ups, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.